All numbers start with 1. 1 is the quintessential number, or the definition of number. It's through 1 that all other numbers are represented. 2 is one number. 3, 4, 1,000 equally fall under the class of 1. In being, in some sense, individuals. All phenomena, ideas, are 1. Plurality, multiplicity, infinity, impossibility, nothingness, sextillion, are all 1. We can say that their form is 1. And only after unifying something into 1, after rendering it intelligible, do we actually supply an adjective describing it as plural, infinite, multiple, etc. Multiplicity itself arises from the intuition of 1, and however multiplicitous something happens to be, we never actually cease to think of it as 1. Its frequency is merely something about it. It's the first thing that we grasp about things, as well as the last thing. This isn't saying that 1 is single. 1 is a world that includes many things. It's known by many things: logos, axiom, principle, concept, topic. In philosophical circles, on the other hand, circulates the term universal, which may be defined as a world of some sort. 1 is not a single thing. Not one apple, one car, or one building. Those are single things, things to which we assign the concept 1 as an adjective. It's not the Platonic 1 that's been alluded to. To properly understand it, we can't use it as an adjective. The 1 that's used to count concrete objects is inadequate, because, again, it reduces it to an adjective. We have to think of 1 as a world in itself, or an axiom, not merely an occupant. One apple is a description which obscures the process by which we came to possess the notion apple. And so it's the idea or nature of apple that the number points to, not to how many of it there is. The true distinction between the two senses of 1 lies in the morphological sense in which we consider it, where it's not a given object's quantity or frequency that's accounted for, but at which stage in the analysis of its nature we're in. As in philosopher Bosanquet's phrase, it's a world whose members are worlds. Numerical statements such as 1, 3, or 10 apples are thus to be regarded as statements about the concept apple, and not a definition of it. The notion of 1 eludes us if merely taken in the atomic sense, as a point on a plane, as we do in counting objects. Yes, there is such a thing as plurality, as single apple or single apples, but by 1 we intend to describe the simplest and most general sense in which anything whatsoever can present itself. And what we find on reflection is that our experience of objects, in general, whether in ideal or concrete form, always follows the same rhythm. We start by acknowledging, whether tacitly, that the object is complex and in a certain sense atemporal, and that many things can be said about it or derived from it. Its shape and qualities, its size, its behavior. We find that we're in continuous dialogue with it. Here, the simplest possible thing that can be said about it is the thing in its crudest and most rudimentary form, before any judgments can be made about it. It's precisely this neutral state that we're in dialogue with all along. Thus, however difficult and shifty its qualities happen to be, however unfamiliar or difficult to describe it is, its initial state of neutrality is what allows us to hold on to it, change, fix, or develop or alter any misconceptions we may have held about it. Its neutrality enables us to converse with it, and preserve that crude, unconditional relation through the shortcomings of understanding. Geometrically, it's not the point, the line, but the plane itself within which the subject, yourself, is enclosed. That is, in a nutshell, oneness. By extension, if the line or the point happens to be the world within which the analysis procedure takes place, it only means that the line or the point is 1. Thus 1 is distinguished by its morphological character. The true sense of 1, as regards apple, is the construction process of the idea, according to things like its genus, that it's a fruit, and fruit, as we understand it, being a class of edible plants that possess the quality sweetness. We see that apple is a symbol depicting a whole system of relations involving increasingly more complex series of classifications, in which objects are derived from more general objects or classes of the same thing. Thus always, when we want to define something, we call to attention its nature. We go big, so to speak, defining it under more general, simpler concepts. For example, a human is a species of such and such genus, where human is included under the more general category of species and genus. One here is the world, as distinguished by the overall topic or genus, under which all traits and attributes are commonly assimilated. Say an apple, and treating it as something known, does not account for that amazing logical apparatus whose product is what we eventually call apple. We do, however, account for it when we're forced to define or explain it out. Only in such circumstances, where a definition is called for, do we actually enter the sphere of the number 1, because definition involves operating within a certain closed sphere, under a certain rule, a notion that we elect as the context or topic under which any given definition takes place. Every interaction we have with anything has a context to it, and that context, when grasped, is immediately superseded or enclosed within another, just like apple, fruit, plant, etc. This regressive quality is not paradoxical, but defines the meaning of one, recursively. It's the umbrella under which take place any activity whatsoever. The symbolic construct apple is also one, though different from one as the experience involved in forming the idea, only with respect to symbolism. Apple becomes single when symbolizing a process of formation, but shifts over to actual formation when denoting, when rendered a verbal noun. Here is indicated our entry into the sphere of one, and again, it's that process of formation that we call one, not the symbol that points to it, a very crucial difference. Thus, we're here to distinguish between concepts as such and descriptions, or things said about the concepts. Plato and Socrates understood and based on this principle their whole dialectical program. Simply observe how notions like justice, good, love are approached in these dialogues, wherein the meaning of the word is not claimed, but slowly drawn from certain conditions of application. That is, it's attained in the course of discussion, in the dynamics of question and answer, where each good question, idiomatically speaking, breaks open the being of the object, and where, rather than acquiescing to the common sense of the word, meaning is sought in discourse, in being oriented to the logos housed in the concept. In the same breath, the mode of being of language, that the meaning of its words derive from the sense in which we collectively, as a linguistic community, assign to it, reflects the idea of one, as the following passage by Gadamer informs. The commonness that grows, nurtures, and binds the content of speech, thought, behavior, and activity can always be taken as a function of one. It's not something that arises from the impulse or instinct to count, but is a condition rooted in the process of understanding which counting itself falls under. Consider the following propositions. A vehicle needs fuel to run. A body requires sustenance to function. Sound requires ears to be heard. What those three propositions have in common is that in each case, a very specific condition is fulfilled or is being fulfilled by something. This something is integral and necessary. We note that by integrating, it qualifies or renders the concept ready for action. By providing the fuel, the car is ready to run, and through sustenance, the body is provided the energy needed to function. And as such, so is the case with objects and ideas in relation to ourselves. They require us, conscious, rational individuals, to perceive them, and what they are is intelligibles, meaningful only with respect to us, who give them meaning. That is, their openness to us is owing to our openness to them. What we take away from here is that the fulfillment of the condition is only the beginning of a certain activity. If the ear is needed for hearing, then the hearing process which having an ear makes possible to the sound is different from the condition of actually hearing a sound, i.e., The ability to hear is different and provisory to actual hearing. The mind is requisite to understanding. Sight or vision is requisite to perception. Body is requisite to feeding or walking. Thus, not only is our very existence integral to all that which exists, but we understand the former as an ability, capacity, or equipment, as a precondition to certain conditions. Here we recognize something to which we've so far only alluded. Note the strangely mendicant tendency of the conditions of sound, fuel, sustenance, how, independently meaningful though they are, exclusively demand or require the presence of vehicle, body, and sound, and how these are equally mendicant with respect to the former. This mendicant mode of being is analogous to that integral mode of being, which is the object's openness to us, and our reciprocal dependency on them. Either condition seems to be made to the other's specification, like Lego pieces. The alethic mode of the latter is how we would experience one as the recipients of phenomena, but ourselves are aware of our oneness in our unconditional orientation towards the phenomenal world. Here we recall the idea of neutrality. When in a state of expectancy or anticipation, what we're feeling is an object's openness to us, i.e., its oneness, its congeniality to our own faculty of reception, which is our own oneness. We're the center here, and that which encloses us is one. The context, the circle, becomes concentric as the sphere of relation in which an object is involved grows. The world, or the context within which we're originally confined, expands. The circle grows in proportion to our increase in knowledge as to the presuppositions involved in any given concept. Consider the way individuals are referred to in the Quran. Ahad, the subject form of wahid, one, means that the person is not just single, a mere individual, a component of humanity, but rather an exponent, an agent, whether of an ideology, an ethnic group, or denomination. Number in the Quran is a central issue. In reading it, it's natural that we should interpret its use of number as identical with ours. That one should, for example, mean a single thing, or that two is a collection of two things, and so on, which does not reflect the Quranic use of number at all. The Quranic use of number is very, let's say, algebraic, in that its concepts and propositions follow a binary propositional structure, as demonstrated above. For instance, terms predicated on number, as all terms are by the way, such as yom, meaning day, sana, year, don't express our own discrete chronometric measurement scheme of a duration of 24 hours, and a year as a duration of 365 days or 12 months, but rather it follows a more intuitive scheme whereby the completeness of a certain process is gauged by way of the conditions required for the perfect and total expression of the thing. The common mistake as regards number is that we tend to substitute the process of symbolizing for a symbol that denotes it, ascribing to the symbol more reality than the process of its formation, forgetting in the process all the intricacies which the number is supposed to point to. Or, as Bergson put it, pure duration, that which consciousness perceives, is not a quantity, and as soon as we try to measure it, we unwittingly replace it by space. The best way to understand number is by looking at the phenomenological process which embodies it, which is that of our sense of time. The term day is commonly used as a container, something that contains, a shell that we use in a sense that's void of content. Our day is taken in the calendrical sense of an empty time module sectioned off from a supposedly indefinite forward-stretching line, or, as Worf put it, an evenly scaled limitless tape measure, elaborating that the formal equality of the space-like units by which we measure and conceive time leads us to consider the formless item, or substance of time, to be homogeneous and in ratio to the number of units. In the Quran, however, and in a way that comports with and reflects the peculiar psychology of the people to whom it was revealed, a day is always an event, but an event that's felt as a horizon within which we dwell. We don't gaze at an empty section of the calendar or at a discrete time unit, but we are situated, as it were, in the midst of the content which the day is about. Thus, it's based on the aforementioned intentional and compact sense of number. In other words, what a day is what a day is about. Think of it as a narrative or a theme that surrounds and describes a certain phenomena from the viewpoint of the subject. Sena, on the other hand, and to the potential surprise of many viewers, is smaller than day. It's all that which takes place, or is included under the umbrella of day. Thus, using Sena, year, is a way of expressing the way by which we fulfill the conditions originally posited at Yom, or day. We make as our context the process of bringing the fuel that's to power the car, or the sustenance that's to provide the energy to the body, or, to cite a familiar example, Achilles overtaking the tortoise in Zeno's paradox. When we ascribe to any number of these scenarios the adjective day, we start to think about what they involve, and not the scenarios themselves. The process of bringing these two things together is precisely what's expressed by the term Sena, or year, where we understand a fulfillment process has taken place but whose outcome is only a prospect that we're approaching, but whose attainment is contingent on the conditions that must be met in due course. But when the condition is successfully fulfilled, we have a day. But overall, day serves its function in providing that sense of distance. The fact that the outcome is a prospect mediated by numerous conditions gives way to motion and activity. Thus, whereas Yom depicts us within the horizon of the event itself, Sena is the realization of that distance, or the sense of approaching the outcome. Take the following verse from chapter 12. Joseph's interpretation goes, "You'll plant grain for 7 consecutive years," advising that they should be conservative as regards their harvest. Years, Sinin, clearly describes an event that's in the process of development, the process being planting. Now planting, harvesting, etc. are all process terms, or phrases, all of which take place within the framework of day, Yom, which here is the theme, or the topic which those things are about. Sena, year, is used instead of Yom because, as said, Sena denotes a process that's still in effect, and the process is that of constructing a day, Yom. But not only is day the outcome suggested by the process, it's also that which guides the process. Thus, a day is not measured by any discrete units of time, such as hours or minutes, etc., but rather it's measured by Sena, by a process of realization or of bringing into reality. Another example is from chapter 23, which goes, "He will ask them, 'How many years did you remain on earth?' And they will reply, 'We remained only a day or a part of a day,' but ask those who kept count." Once again, Yom is the context, which is the term abad, or abode, which is the point of the whole thing, and Sinin, years, as an adjective serves to amplify the term into abiding, so as to in some way express endurance, giving it a certain extension. The reply which the men gave, "We stayed a day or a part of a day," says that they think they spent a lifetime, as lifetime has that same sense of compactness or magnitude that indirectly points to the details contained within it. Basically, the verse goes, "How long did you stay on earth?" And the reply goes, "We stayed a lifetime," or something like that. What's meant by counting there, adad, is not traditional counting of given a certain number, but more of a figurative or intuitional sense, a subjective or lived time, or la durée, as Bergson calls it. Thus, if passing my school examination represents a day, then Sinin would be the subjective experience that led to passing my examination, gathering material, attending classes, revisions, etc. Thus, counting here, adad, is more reminiscent, let's say. Typically, two is understood as the juxtaposition of two separate things. In the Quran, however, two, ithnain, is something else. When describing phenomena or external objects, we often do so independently of our own involvement in the process. We view things as though we're not there. The Quran's sense of two, however, describes an observation as the sum of the object observed and the subject that's the observer. Each observation made, each thought, is based on the prior condition of having established a point-to-point contact with the object. The judgment supplied simply arises from it. Thus, I know that a car has 4 wheels only when I've come into contact with the car, physically or mentally. Look at any judgment you make and see that it's based on prerequisites that make it so that you're able to make such and such judgment in the first place. That before I start speaking, I need someone to speak to. Before I start breathing, I need lungs. Before I think, I need content to think about, and so on. Always perceive the prerequisites of any relation to get to the concept too. Coming into contact with something, the simplest of these ascending series of prerequisites, allows me to infer all those other things from it. 2 means that any process is based on a prior, more fundamental condition. Having 2 means that we have critical mass, a premise on whose basis new propositions can be made. God gave man livestock in pairs, because 2 includes all that's to come, and what's needed for reproduction. A pair of fruits here is significant because the proposition every pair makes each pair the seedbed of variety and diversity. Because no pair produces duplicates or clones of itself, but rather each offspring is unique, colored by different conditions and arranged differently to the pair from which they descend, and will therefore have different capacities and qualities. Again, it's a world whose members are worlds, meaning that the offspring of 2 are themselves reproductive, and will contain in potential form, and to the greatest extent possible, varieties of itself, thus becoming the class of a new series all sharing its principal quality, hence the verse, "And we created pairs of everything," which suggests that all creation have a procreative capacity. Thus God laid down, in all His creation, a reproductive apparatus in one form or another. This is the sense in which 2 is used. This is what we meant by 2 includes all that's to come. A pair of fruits is one under which falls numerous specimens and types, each of which is procreative.